I'm going to call the Sherwood City Council August 5, 2014 to order. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Mayor Middleton.
Here.
Council President Henderson.
Here.
Councilor Grant.
Here.
Councilor Folsom is absent. Councilor Butterfield is absent. Councilor Langer.
Here.
Councilor Clark.
Here.
Thank you.
Our first item on the consent agenda, approval of July 15, 2014 City Council meeting minutes. Resolution 2014-054, authorizing the city manager to sign successor intergovernmental agreement with the Washington County Consolidated Communications Agency for the purposes of providing public safety dispatch services. Resolution 2014-055, authorizing partial waiver of the water system development charges to allow connection of property to the city water for property with contaminated drinking water, well water.
Move consent.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. I have one citizen comment form, and that is from Bob Eady.
Yes, I'm Bob Eddy, 16819 Southwest Stellar. I'm sure you've all received a copy of the request that I had Sylvia send to you a couple of weeks ago. As I'm sure you're all aware, I'm a member of the Sherwood YMCA, and I'm still appalled at the blatant attempts of a city council member and the mayor to discredit the Y. I first became aware of the situation when I read the mayor's public comments following the June 18th, 2013 council meeting. I initially tried to interact with the mayor via email, but was summarily dismissed. As a member of the Y, I then asked for documentation that related to whatever the disputes were about, from both the local Y and the Columbia-Willamette corporate Y. At that time, I had not previously met Mr. Emmons, Mrs. Browse, or Mr. Hall. After reading the documents I received, it was evident that the 32-minute, in quotes, unnoticed topic missing from the agenda of the June meeting was orchestrated. It also became apparent that a couple of our elected officials were using their seats on the dais to attempt to
Okay, I'm going to stop you now. You're not supposed to impugn the council. I'm sorry. You're done. Please, you can't impugn the council. If you want to go on and just talk on your own facts, that's fine.
Yeah, I never heard.
It's under the council rules if you'd
Mr.
like to
Langer.
read the
I never
council
heard Mr.
rules.
Langer being impugned.
Well, we're not.
Last year, huh?
You're out of order. Please,
no
we're
problem.
stopping
We'll just
that.
send
We're
it.
not doing that anymore. Nobody's
Oh,
impugning
really?
us, okay?
That's good.
Thank you.
It's not okay.
Our clause, and please remember the same thing.
What's the same thing, Bill? I didn't hear what you said.
Don't impugn anybody on the council or staff.
What? Don't
Don't impugn us on the council or the staff.
Like
Just
what
get
Roger
facts.
said, nobody can say anything that low. Robert James Clause 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. Now, I have a question that I would like answered in writing by the council. Did you or did you not sign a contract with the highest density in the history of Sherwood with Cascade Development? And was that signed 2.5 years approximately before this alleged public hearing was held where we were discussing density and design? Now, my understanding is that Barry Elster and Hammond prepared a contract that was fully executed by this council, selling that for $5,000 a unit when the prevailing price was 10. I understand that Cascade Development had a consulting contract. You wouldn't know about this, Councilor Clark. It was actually your husband that tipped me off to all of this and said all of this has been done in private, in executive sections. And I want to know if Cascade Development was paid a fee, and I want to know under what grounds and authority you thought you could do that. Secondarily, I want to know if in the new Walmart solely owned property, if in point of fact that PUD was parceled and this council had an executive session and knew that PUD was going to parcel out and allow that land to be sold, which required a cancellation of the PUD immediately. And I want to know again, since our government official here, Mr. Crean, can answer this, was his law firm involved in drafting those documents that let that aberrant item occur, i.e. you took a PUD, parceled a piece out, sold it to a separate property? Because my mind was in the Planning Commission, if I remember correctly, Councilman Langer said on 3 different occasions it wasn't.
Don't use Councilman Langer's. We're just trying to keep this. This is all going to have to probably go back to staff anyway, because I don't think.
I'm sorry, Bill, I didn't know what you're saying, but shut off the clock if you're giving me advice, because you're cutting
Not
in.
advice, I'm just telling you, we don't want to mention council people's names.
You don't want,
If you're impugning him, if you're accusing him of something, we'd rather just have the staff
I'm
take
not
care of it.
impugning him of anything. Those are a matter of public record.
Okay.
And for you to sit there and say you're impugning somebody,
I'm just saying, we don't want to bring up councilmen's names that they were involved in certain things till we get to the facts, okay? I mean, I don't know, I wasn't even here then, so it's going to
Well,
have to
that's
come from
right.
staff
So,
back to us.
Of all of the people that should be listening to what was said, rather than cutting into my 30 seconds now,
I'll give you another minute, but,
great.
Okay,
Now,
so
let
go
me
on
go
to it.
back and say what I said.
All right.
I was in the Planning Commission, and my memory is clear. It was asked if Langer was buying that if Walmart was buying that property, and the answer was no. In fact, the Planning Commissioner asked it, the head of the Planning Commission asked it 3 times. Now, if that is true, then there is no possible way, under any circumstances, you could have had an executive session where you allowed this staff to deviate from the plans of a PUD. Now, why do I ask this? Because in every case, massive amounts of public money are involved. Massive amounts. Now, if our public official, Mr. Crean, knew that, I want to know it. And then I want to know if there was any place in the public record he said, oh, I may have a potential conflict of interest. My law firm will have to draft those documents up. Now, I've been asked to ask that question specifically on the record. Now, this is a matter you had in executive session, it appears. You sold that by contract 2.5 years earlier. I want to know who drafted the contract. I want to know if it was your legal counsel who claims to be a public official so that the proper complaints can be filed with the proper authorities. Now, that is not impugning anybody's reputation. That's asking for facts.
And that's
I
correct.
want to know that. Now, back to my 1 additional minute. The reason I want to know that is because if that kind of conduct is occurring here, the citizens are entitled to know it by law. This is not something that you idly do. You don't have somebody sit in the room, know you're going to have to draft, in effect, documents that are going to excuse ex parte contact, which you're denying you're having. Then you have someone saying on the public record, that's not happening. We're entitled, and we should be privileged. If we know nothing else, we should at least know what went on. Because all of that can be done for a very simple reason, Mr. Mayor. You have sovereign immunity and you have city-county insurance, and you know this as well as I do, that will even defend an intentional tort. Somebody can know they're breaking the law, and they will still defend that individual, again, at our cost. And I don't want to hear the nonsense Keith Mays gave that doesn't cost us money. Because when you pay $750, $800, $1 million, everybody's insurance goes up. That's what self-insurance is about. The citizens pay for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you get all that down? So some answer his questions? Thank you.
I have a question for staff. So items that are covered under executive privilege are not things that we talk about in the public and are not things that we divulge to people who are not in the executive session. So if executive session information was disseminated outside of the members of the executive session, that would be a violation of executive privilege. So if Mr. Claus gained executive privilege information, then that would be in violation of the laws that govern our ability, which are very restrictive,
Right, to a point, that's a contract.
to what is covered under executive privilege, which are real property, personnel, litigation, confidential records, correct?
Those are the
So-
general categories, and I'd
Yeah.
actually defer to Chris probably on an answer relative to that, but
So obviously, if a court of law required the content of an executive privilege session to be divulged for the purposes of legal proceedings, that would be done. But if a counselor talks to a person outside of that executive privilege session, then that would be a violation of executive
So
privilege.
right, what is discussed in the executive session is prohibited from, not prohibited, is excluded from disclosure. Recall that the public records laws, the public meetings laws in Oregon presume all public records are subject to disclosure, except where there is an exception. Executive, yeah, that's rattling quite a bit. So things discussed in executive session are exempt from disclosure. If the executive session privilege is breached, then those materials become subject to public disclosure. Now, it would be a breach of an elected official's duty to knowingly breach the executive session laws because only the council as a whole can agree to waive that exemption from disclosure.
Right. Not one individual
No, not
counselor.
one individual counselor, that's right. That would be a breach of your duty, obligation to the municipal corporation.
Okay. So for those people who don't understand what executive privilege was, I thought it would be helpful to.
That's right, that's right.
To
There
sort
are
of
there are a few
clarify.
limited exceptions to the general principle that all public records are available and open to the public for disclosure. You listed some of the things that you can meet in private about if you're buying property, labor negotiations, litigation. Those kinds of things can be discussed in private, but if you start discussing them openly, then they're not private anymore and they can be disclosed.
Right. And executive privilege allows the press to be present in the room, which is sort of a check and balance.
That's right. They
To
can be
keep
there, but they can't
councils-
report on anything they hear.
Right. Unless we
That's right. So if you waive the privilege and allow those things to be disclosed,
Right.
then the press can start publishing what they heard in executive session.
right. Or if we talk about things that aren't covered by the noticing that we've posted regarding what we're talking about.
That's right. So executive session is very limited. So if you meet to discuss litigation, you have to discuss that litigation. You can't start discussing other things. That's correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look over the minutes. I kind of didn't understand a lot of that, so if there is things, we can release to them, and if there isn't, so.
And Mayor Melton, I think that he was talking about something that was published as going to be talked about. I don't think he was talking about something that he talked to somebody about. Yeah, so,
He mentioned something that was in executive session, which is why.
Yeah, I also didn't understand what he was talking about.
Okay.
I think it was
public-
published to be in an executive session. I think that's what he was saying. That's what I
An
understand.
actual public records request would help clarify.
We published
They'll-
topic,
It was so long ago.
not some cascade development.
yeah,
It's pretty common for him to show up and say things that none of us understand.
Well, let's just not go into that,
I guess
okay?
what I would
You
what I
don't need
would
to be
recommend-
insulting.
What I would recommend is all staff will happily listen to the tape again to get the
Thank
relevant
you.
points. I do believe that Chris is right. A records request probably would be in order for a lot of the information that he was looking for. That would probably be the proper way to do it. And then if we still have questions, I'll be happy to contact him and see if I can get some better information exactly what
Okay.
answers and questions he was looking for. So
And
All
if
right.
there's something for us to follow up on, you'll forward that to council?
that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Presentations. Now, CU 4.0 students got a little lesson here on how this works. Sherwood High School Student Academic and Athletic Achievement Recognition.
Well, thank you, Mayor. One of the great things that we hear about Sherwood all the time is how wonderful our school system is. And we have, I think, 109, something like that, different students in the Sherwood School District that got a 4-point this year. And we have a couple people who got a first place at state in some athletic events. So it's a great honor actually to read all the names off and to go through this. And we're actually going to split this up into 2 different nights. So tonight we're going to go through the people that we got on our list who RSVP'd to be here tonight, and there may be some that didn't make it to our list for one reason or another. So if you're here and I don't call your name out, we do have your certificate here in the pile, and we'll be happy to get it for you and recognize you tonight. But all the people that we are going to recognize tonight and who hopefully were able to make it received a 4.0 for the 2013-2014 school year. And so congratulations, great deal. Typically, I think you guys come around here, and I'll go ahead and read the names, and then we can hand these out. Okay. So, Meryl, and the ones that come up to you, and then you can give to them. Okay. All right, so apologies in advance if I mess any names up. But Caitlin Beckman. Is Caitlin here? All right. There you go. Wyatt Boyle. Jacob Buckner. This is Jacob Buckner. Madeline Coots. Addison DeBoer. Brendan Hand. Richard Hecker. Haley Hamilton. Timothy Harris. Thomas Harris. Taylor Monroe. Amy C.
Woo, Amy!
Brian Smith. This is a name I recognize from last year. Arjun Vijay. Michael Wakefield. Benjamin Wyron. So I'm going to do a couple of athletic ones, and then we'll come back to anybody else who might be here that I didn't call out. But recognizing the first in state in the 5A's girl discus is Elise Cuthbertson. And first in state in the 5A boys 100 meter is Hunter Pfefferkorn. So did I miss anybody out there who's here tonight who would like to come up and get their certificate and shake the mayor's hand, councilor's hands?
Raise your hand if this is your second year for the 4-0.
All right, and thank you, Colleen. Apparently, we have an overachiever, and also getting a 4.0 for the 2013-14 school year. Other than being able to throw the discus is Elise Pepperson.
Anybody 3 years in a row? Oh. Anybody 4 years in a row? Okay, next year. 4 years in a row. Thank you very much.
That's amazing.
So one quick announcement, there are some cookies and some punch out in the hall. That's specifically for our achievers in the school district. So their families can go out, keep it down to a dull roar, and thank you very much for coming and for all that you do.
Okay, our next item of business is under new business. Resolution 2. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to introduce the new library director. I apologize. And I did the growth update.
Thank you. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you our new library manager, Adrienne Doman-Calkins. She started with us on July 14th, so she has a few weeks under her belt, and we're just thrilled to have her. She's been a wonderful addition to our staff. I'm actually going to turn it over to her and let her talk a little bit about her background and give you a quick library update.
Thank you, Kristen. Good evening, Mayor, Council President, Councilors, Sherwood staff. Oh, that's better. Sherwood staff and Sherwood citizens. It is an honor to be here and an honor to be working with everybody here. I also really appreciate coming on after the high school students. Even though they left, they're all about learning right now in the present, and the library is about lifelong learning, so it fits together. This has been like coming home for me to come back to Oregon and in an area so near to me. As you may know, I grew up in McMinnville, just down the road, and I went to college at the University of Oregon in Eugene and lived in Portland prior to moving to Olympia. I worked in Washington for the last 10 years at the Olympia Timberland Library as a senior circulation supervisor there. Timberland Regional Library has 27 branches in 5 counties, and other experience I bring with me is from working at the Oregon College of Art and Craft Library, also down the road in Portland, the Garden Home Community Library, Blackwell's Book Services, University of Oregon Libraries, and McMinnville Public Library. So since starting here on July 14th, I've been focusing on getting to know the staff in the library, the city, the Washington County Cooperative Library Services, and I've been having one-on-one meetings with the staff at the library. Almost all of them so far, as well as meetings and trainings on the technology, HR, the budget, all the details that help the library fit in with the city. I want to thank Kristen and Jenny Swanson as well in the library, Mary Madeline, and the rest of the city and Washington County staff for the knowledge they've shared with me. I feel like a sponge soaking it all up. Sherwood Public Library is lucky to have a very experienced staff, as you may know, and many of the staff have their master's degrees in library and information science. So together, we are eager to be moving forward in the library to offer more reference services, more services for adult programming, and outreach and partnering with other community organizations. We invite the community to let us know your ideas. The library is your living room. I want to also share some of the success stories from the library this summer. The summer reading program for youth is wrapping up. Kids are coming in to turn in their reading logs and pick up prizes. We've had 1,210 participants, with 984 of those as children participants and 226 teen participants. That is 25% of the youth in our service population. We've had 1,859 participants at June and July youth programs this summer. The biggest turnout for a summer event was a new performer for us this year. 304 people attended the Border Collies International Performance, and that was just out here. And you may have seen the Border Collies jumping and doing tricks, and that was our biggest one so far. The adult summer reading program, Literary Elements, goes through the end of the month. We've had 300 participants, and it's not too late to register. If you register, share book reviews, and then be entered into weekly drawings for local prizes. We've seen an average of 730 people visit the library per day this summer. Our stats are high in the summer because of the big summer festival, remind me.
That music of the great and the Robin Hood.
Robin Hood, thank you, Robin Hood Festival. I moved here a few days before the Robin Hood Festival, which was great.
I was like, it's not always like this. Every weekend.
In July, our patrons checked out 22,189 physical items and 1,143 ebooks and downloadable audiobooks from Library to Go. Last fiscal year, Sherwood Public Library patrons checked out 367,266 items, the sixth highest total of the Washington County Cooperative Library branches. Sherwood patrons checked out an average of 1.23 items per person in our service area, or an average of 20 items per person last fiscal year. And speaking of fiscal years, we have our new money this year, and so we're ordering lots of new books and AV, and so it's a good time to come browse our new bookshelves in the library in the front area and see the newest of the new. I will close by telling you about a few upcoming events. This Friday, August 8th, from 2 to 4 p.m., read to Sasha, which is a dog, a therapy dog, so you can brush up on your reading skills. Maybe not you, but little ones. Brush up on your reading skills in a fun and non-judgmental environment while reading with a trained therapy dog for 20 minutes. Each participant gets a certificate and a photo with Sasha. It's designed for independent readers, and you can reserve your spot by stopping by the front desk or calling the library. You can also read to Karma, another therapy dog, on Friday, August 15th from 2 to 4 p.m. Join us on Wednesday, August 13th, 6 to 7 p.m. in the community reading room for do-it-yourself bookmarks. Participants ages 11 to adults are welcome to join us to make personalized metal bookmarks with beads, charms, and feathers. We'll provide crafting supplies and call to register in advance for that one. Summer Crafternoon, and the theme is insects, is on Monday, August 18th at 2 p.m., and we will meet in the children's department. All ages are welcome to join us for bug-themed coloring and crafting, and this is a free drop-in event. No registration is necessary. The next family story time is Saturday, August 23rd at 10:30 a.m. here in this room. Saturday Family Story Times repeats every month on the fourth Saturday. All ages are welcome to join in on stories, songs, and a craft. We often feature a live animal guest. I believe this coming one is a bunny, and no registration is necessary. The theme this month is the author Mo Willems. And on Monday, August 25th, from 10:30 to 11:30 a.m., we will have a drop-in program for ages 3 and up, featuring Duplo and Lego blocks, as well as puzzles, and that will also be in this room. And lastly, something that is hot off the press. We just booked this today. The Bug Chicks is a very popular program. I don't know if you've seen them, but these two bug scientists come in and they display bugs and let the kids interact with the bugs and everything. So mark your calendars, October 4th, 10:30 a.m. It's very popular. They will be here. And so I want to thank you, and I look forward to working with you and this community, and hope to see you at the library.
Thank you. Council comments?
So, nice to meet you. I've stopped by the library 3 times, and every time you were gone.
Oh, sorry about that.
Apparently 4th time's a charm for me. I was just wondering, how is your job today different from the job you had up in Washington?
Well, in Washington, I was a department manager rather than a manager for a whole library. So my job here has a broader focus where I'm managing the whole library, so adult services, youth services, circulation. I'm working with a smaller team of people, but a team of people who are responsible for a greater variety of work in the library. The similar part, actually, between the two libraries, Olympia Timberland Library and this, is that both are city-owned buildings. So even though I was part of a library district, I still have some background working with the city. And the library district in the past where I was, they provided the staff, the materials, the technology, but the building, the facility was maintained by the city. So that part's similar, but I have a different responsibility in this role. So getting to know everybody on the city here, actually the budget is one of the biggest differences. I didn't have to worry about the budget in quite the same way. A library district, they gave me parts of the budget to manage, mostly for staffing, extra hours, things like that, small supplies budgets. But to have the entire budget to look at, I'm learning a lot. So I keep looking at Julie because she's been so helpful. I met with her for about 2 hours last week. So that part's different. Washington County Cooperative Library Services as a cooperative is different than a district as well. I'm used to a library collection being owned by the whole district. And so no one library branch buys and owns their books. Whereas here we have the Sherwood Public Library collection. Right. We can borrow things from the other libraries, but they don't all belong to the same library. So that's a big difference for me. And that's my next focus after getting to know the staff and all of their questions and concerns and knowing how I need to help them the most. Then I want to get to know our collection the most before going out into the community and talking up the library even more.
And did you come back to Oregon because you have family in Oregon?
That's one of the reasons, yeah. I mean, I came here because the library job was so fantastic. The Sherwood Library and the city, all of that. I mean, it was a dream job. It didn't matter where it was. It was just amazing. But I do have family really close by. And I should say, it's not that it didn't matter where it was. It didn't matter that I was leaving Washington, if that makes sense. I wasn't just moving to Oregon and then happened to find the job. I moved here for the job. But my family, they were in McMinnville. They've moved up. Now they're mostly in Lake Oswego. I have family in Beaverton and Vancouver as well. And so that's been great. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. We need to get together. I was waiting till Les Mis was done. Yeah.
Did you have her test a chair?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you sat in the chair yet. Did
The
you sit in the two chairs?
folding chair? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Taking people through it, that's right.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mayor, if I could have a second, I have
Go
a
ahead.
couple of new staff that we'd just like to briefly
Oh, sure.
introduce. So, as you know, we opened up a temporary position because we had a lot of CET grants in the planning department, and so a lot of work to do this year. And so, Julia, can you introduce Connie Randall for us?
Sure. Connie is sitting in the front row. There she is. She can come up and answer questions if you want, and I think that would be great. She didn't have a speech prepared. We're really excited to have her. She comes to us with over 14 years of experience in Arizona, Wisconsin, and Washington, so a lot of great diversity, and she's a Sherwood resident, so we're really excited to have her on board and have her experience and help us with the important planning projects we have going forward.
Great. And finally, Emily Looning is joining us. Emily's right over here against the wall. She's actually splitting her time between Sherwood and West Lynn. She's working half-time in both cities. And she's just an intern for 6 months, and she's really helping us develop some of the economic development pieces that we've talked about, trying to getting that committee or commission up and running, as well as finishing up SERPAC's business. So glad to have her, and she's going to be a big help to us.
Well, thank you and welcome. Our next item of business will be the Sherwood Growth Analysis and Update. Julia?
I'm going to present from here. I've got a PowerPoint presentation for you. And as I get started, this is actually a presentation that Tom and I did for the Sherwood School Board and then the Sherwood Long Range Planning Committee. They were asking for a little bit more information about growth and kind of what to look at. And so we prepared this for them, and we've modified a little bit to be more more general and a little less school-specific, but it's generally following that format. And one of the first purposes of the presentation is really to understand the regional context and where Sherwood fits in there. So this map here is the metro area. It's the metro growth concept map. And the important thing that we want to highlight here is that while Sherwood is unique and Sherwood is Sherwood, it's also part of a regional government that we are regulated by. And unlike many cities around the state that have to plan for and accommodate their 20-year growth supply or growth and projections, in the Portland metro area, that is regulated by Metro. Metro has the responsibility of projecting the 20-year land need and making sure that there's enough land within the urban growth boundary to accommodate that. So the map, it's hard to see from here, but the tannish area on the map is the urban reserve, which, as you recall, about 2 years ago, Metro, Washington County, and Clackamas County completed the urban and rural reserves process. And the urban reserves are designated the 50-year supply of land that when Metro goes through their urban growth report and has to make the determination every 5 years on whether or not they need to expand the urban growth boundary, the urban reserve area is the area that they will be pulling from. And this is intended to be a 50-year supply. So they have room to grow over the next 50 years. The green area is what's referred to as rural reserves, which is not to be touched for 50 years. It is it will not be urbanized for 50 years at least. So that the idea there is that it provides certainty for property owners, farmers, developers. When farmers were looking to lease land or determine where they wanted to buy land, a lot of times they didn't know where the urban growth boundary was going to be expanded into. The area that's kind of looking gray on the screen, it's white on the map, is undesignated. And so in theory, if within that 50-year period, the metro region uses up all the urban reserve land, they cannot go into that rural reserve land. The only areas that they could potentially go into would be that undesignated land. So it's not the first place that they would look, but it's potentially a place that they could look if they've used up their urban reserves. And Tom and I kind of tag-teamed this with the school district. He chose not to sit over here with me tonight because he's in the city manager position or assistant city manager position. But if he wants to chime in at any point, I know he will. So I'm looking at you. So this is a close-up of the urban reserve area around Sherwood. The blue area is all the areas that were designated urban reserve. Again, that's a 50-year supply of land. The area west of Sherwood and south of Sherwood, south of the Brookman area, was primarily brought in for residential purposes, and the area to the east of Sherwood was primarily brought in for employment purposes. And I recognize that that's a lot of area, and that seems pretty big, but I want to just point out the big picture. And when Metro and the city is looking at where to grow and how to grow and what to project, the forecasts are made up to 50 years out. There's the urban reserve. So first of all, it has to be in the urban reserves in order to be developed. Then it has to be determined by Metro to be needed to be brought into the urban growth boundary to meet that 20-year land supply. And then when it's in the urban growth boundary, it has to be brought into the city limits in order to be urbanized, for the most part. There's some exceptions, such as Bull Mountain and North Bethany. And then even when it's in the city limits, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be developed. There's a land development process where property has to be zoned for specific uses. The property owner has to want to develop the property. A lot of people think that once it's in the city, then it's going to be developed, and that may or may not be the case. It really depends on the property owner and whether or not they want to develop. Then those property owners or the developers who have purchased or have an agreement to purchase from the property owner submit a land use application. They go through the land use process to demonstrate compliance. Then there's, once land use approval is granted, there's a more detailed public improvement plan review, and then finally construction. And really the point of explaining this to especially the school district and the long-range planning committee and the public is helping people to understand that it's a long process and that it doesn't just happen overnight, even when things start to seem like they're happening. And one of the things that we really wanted to highlight is that there's a lot that we kind of know, we project and we anticipate, but we don't know really the detail of what's going to happen until you get closer to actual development. And this next slide is trying to illustrate that. And the idea of this slide is really demonstrating that at the urban reserves phase, the urban reserves process, we have a picture. It's a really fuzzy picture. We know kind of the colors that are there. We kind of know what the uses are going to be, but we don't know a lot of detail. We don't know exactly how much land is developable. We don't know exactly what the uses are going to be, exactly how things are going to work. And as you go through the process, through the concept planning process, you get the picture a little bit more clearer. When it's brought into the urban growth boundary, the picture becomes a little bit more clear. You know, it's probably within the next 20 years, although still maybe not. When it's annexed, then you have a much better idea. It can be developed, it can be urbanized once it's annexed into the city and developed. And at that point, you really know at least what the zoning is and what the capacity is within that area. But it isn't until you really get into the actual land use, applications that you have a really clear picture of what the densities are going to be, or what the, not the density, but what the actual number of dwelling units are going to be, where the roads are going to be, how things are going to be laid out, and really getting more into the numbers. And this was especially important for the school district to have that information and really understand kind of where things fell in this process. So moving into Sherwood and the growth discussion, what we know today, Sherwood has a population of 18,575. That's based on the most recent PSU population estimates, certified population estimates. We have approximately 6,700 dwelling units. About a little over 5,000 of those are single family, and about 16,000 of those are multifamily. 1,600? Woo, that's a lot. In the 1 to 2 year look, in 2013, 2014, the building department issued 88 residential building permits. The city approved subdivisions or is in the process of reviewing development that will yield about 83 additional lots, which we believe will be developed within the next year or so. And this map shows you exactly where those are. So we keep track of where building permits are issued, and we communicate that with the school district. So you can really see where development activity is happening. In the 2 to 5 year look, which becomes, remember the picture, it's still there. You kind of can tell what it is, but it gets a little blurrier. We don't have formal land use applications submitted, but we talk to people. We have pre-apps. We kind of have an idea of some areas where people are looking at developing, and we also have our buildable lands inventory. So we have an idea of where there's potential, and we anticipate that within the next 2 to 5 years, approximately another 180 to 225 units will be approved. And one key to note is that this does not assume the Brookman area. That's not annexed yet, so we don't know exactly when that area may develop. So we didn't include that in that 5 year look, especially for the school district discussions. In this map, I want to caveat a lot. This is just kind of highlighting areas where there's where we think there's the most likely. Again, we've had conversations with people. We've had some discussions preliminarily, no applications submitted. If you do the math, it doesn't add up to that 180 to 225 units. So it's just to kind of highlight these areas may or may not come in within the next 2 to 5 years, or there may be areas that we didn't identify that come in, and maybe there's some lot consolidations and some subdivisions, but it's just to give you an idea of kind of where we think it has the most likelihood of developing within the next several years. And the 5 to 10 year picture again becomes a little bit blurrier. We we have some ideas. We assume that Brookman probably will be annexed within the next 5 to 10 years. But even if it's annexed, it has a zone capacity of 1,088 units. Again, blurry picture, but that's kind of the rough estimates we have based on the zoning and what we knew at the time we did the concept plan. But we don't assume all those lots would be developed even within that 5 to 10 year time period. And we assumed about 300 to 500 within the 5 to 10 year time frame. Again, if annexation occurs and if the economy continues on the current trajectory that it is. We also anticipate that we'll continue to see infill and development on existing lots within the city. But there's a limited infill capacity that we have, and we've identified that as about approximately 500 units. And again, that's the map that we've identified. And I want to caveat that just because a lot is identified does not mean a property owner is willing or interested, or that there aren't other constraints that might affect the ability to develop it. And just because a property isn't identified doesn't mean that someone may not be able to figure out a way to consolidate lots or do something different. So you might see development that's not just on those blue tax lots. So 10 years out, it starts getting really, really blurry. And again, we have some ideas. We know there's the urban reserve, but we don't know what the regional demands are going to be, what the population growth is going to be. We don't know what the market is going to be. So just for understanding, the city has, there's 1,280 acres in the urban reserve area west of Sherwood and 439 acres in the area south of Sherwood. Combined, it's estimated these areas would provide an additional 8,000 to 9,600 dwelling units. That was based on the densities assumed by Metro as part of that urban reserve process. So again, as you go through an actual planning process, that may be much less, it may be more. There may be a lot less area developable than was anticipated. So it's a very rough number, and it's a long-term supply, 50 years, and there's a lot of steps in the process that will factor into things. And one thing that we want to highlight is that there are tools in our toolbox to help us, and that this is kind of why we plan and why we look this far out and why we want to keep going back to our master plans and updating those. But there's things that we can do as we go through the process as Metro looks at expanding the urban growth boundary. We can advocate for certain areas or against certain areas. We can, through the annexation process, certainly the city has a lot of ability to have a say in kind of how fast areas develop and in what way. Through the concept planning process, that's where the city really has the ability to shape how we grow. And then, as I think you know, but I'll also state it again, we'll be, and Connie is here this evening because of, we're going to be starting the concept plan for that Sherwood West area. It will be about a year and a half process. And one of the key things that we want to do there is not only identify what the right, mix of uses would be, but a key point of that is to identify the phasing strategy, so the phasing plan, so that we know that we're not wanting to bring that all in or have Metro bring that all in at once. And we want to have the tools in our toolbox to tell Metro, this is how much we can accommodate within the next 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. And we can't accommodate more, or and really making sure that we have, a clear picture of how that area could potentially come in over time. And this is just another, a different look at that area. You can see a little bit more about some natural resources in that area that have been mapped. There may be a lot more as we get into the actual planning and actually are able to get out onto properties. Another thing I want to just highlight for the council and the public, and I'll have Tom chime in a little bit here, because the focus of this presentation, especially for the school district, was on the residential growth. But when we look at long-range planning, we look at all aspects of what makes a complete community. So when we are doing the planning for the Sherwood West area, we're certainly not going to assume all residential. We're going to need to make sure we're looking at what the right mix of commercial and industrial land is, parks, open spaces, schools, what the right, transportation choices should be, water, storm, all those things play into that. But also not just in the Sherwood West area, but as we look at the city as a whole. And Tom, do you want to chime in on what our thoughts are, what your thoughts are for planning for that commercial industrial element?
Well, certainly what we've done in the past is we've done an economic opportunities analysis, which usually typically looks at industrial primarily and jobs creating districts, but also takes a look at commercial things as well. Last plan that we did there was done in 2006 and probably needs to be updated. But I think the good news that we saw out of the economic opportunities analysis that was done back then was we had a supply primarily for job land that is the demand that we needed is less than the Tonkin employment area, which was brought in concept plan and is an urban growth boundary. So we feel very comfortable for the foreseeable future. We have enough land to be able to provide those opportunities from an economic standpoint. And then further south of that, there's additional areas which is at least the same size, if not bigger than the Tonkin employment area, which can be brought in because it's in the urban reserve. So it's basically identified in that 50-year plan. So I think we have a good basis for doing that. We'll probably need to update that economic opportunities analysis. And certainly, the retail component and those other things will be primarily driven by residential need. That analysis showed that we had sufficient land as well for those purposes. So as we see growth and as we see residential, the need to update those plans will grow just to make sure that we have that right balance and that mix so your community isn't out of balance and you don't have enough opportunities for people to be successful in many different ways. But for right now, I think we're in a fairly good place. The one thing I'll jump in here, and Julie, I might be stealing Julia's thunder here, but that first bullet item is actually the most important. The community vision and community values really is critical to making all of this work because I think Sherwood has a unique identity and it has something that is very special. I mean, from my perspective, I think from many others, when you take a look at why people want to be in Sherwood and the community values that people have here, it's a very well-liked community and a place that people want to be. And one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because it's very important that as we go through this process that stays. I think from everybody's perspective that they want to see Sherwood stay what Sherwood is. And so as we work through this 50-year process, it's really important that we engage the community and the community has input into that so that Sherwood can stay what it is and still meet the needs of the metro region growth, which is going to happen. And so we would definitely want this to be a conversation that not only starts today, but continues on with a public dialogue for a long time. So,
thanks. And certainly a little bit stealing my thunder, but not too much. But so as we grow, as we consider growth and we look at, how we deal with growth in the near term through current planning, through, the 2 to 5 year, if you will, considerations. We monitor building permits. We look at trends. We coordinate with agencies. We make sure that we have the right capital improvements identified and have funding identified for those capital improvements. We make sure our system development charges are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and so we're really looking at that aspect of things through the current planning process and the Planning Commission and that. Long term, as Tom said, we need to continue the discussion on what is our community vision and how do we make sure that as we grow, we retain the character that makes Sherwood so special. Looking at both the regional and the local needs, what is our long-term housing need? What are our long-term job needs? Knowing that there probably will be more of a regional burden on us because just of the way the urban reserves are at the boundaries, and we're at the edge of the metro area. But as I mentioned before, there's tools that we have that will help us meter the growth to ensure that that community vision is addressed through both advocacy, through the urban growth boundary discussions, but also through annexation decisions, and also the development code to a certain extent. And then what do we need to do to prepare? We've already done a lot of those. We are in the process of doing some, and we continue to. We just updated our transportation system plan. That's something you should be doing every 5 to 7 years. We're doing our water system master plan. We'll be doing our storm and sanitary sewer master plans this coming year. So we just continue to make sure our plans are up to date and reflecting the most clear picture that we have, knowing that the future is a little blurry. We want to make sure that our projections are constantly being looked at and that we're trying to be as realistic as possible. We coordinate with all the agencies and also making sure that we are advocating for funding not just locally, but at the county level, the metro regional level, state, and even federal level to try to make sure that we've got resources available to do what we need to do. So in summary, growth is going to happen, but we can plan for it. We need to plan for it. We don't want decisions to be made by Metro and then potentially decisions to be out of our hand if we don't plan for it. The picture of what our growth projections are and what is going to happen in this community becomes much clearer as we get closer to the actual date. 1 to 5 years, you certainly have a much clearer picture of how many people are going to be in the community, how many jobs potentially are going to be in the community. The planning for growth requires both, planning for the near-term issues related to growth, but also planning for and preparing for or preventing long-term issues. We coordinate with the city, the school district, the fire, ODOT, Washington County, Clean Water Services, the state, Metro, neighboring jurisdictions. And all of this coordination really will help us ensure that we manage that growth as much as possible. And again, this was for the school district, so I want to highlight that this communication as development occurs really helps the school district anticipate what changes they might have to have at that local level and the district level as we communicate with them where development is occurring. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Any questions or comments?
Council President Henderson?
Could you please put the map back up?
Which map?
I think it was the second map you had.
This one?
No, the urban growth boundary.
That one?
Yes. So I've had a lot of, see the white undesignated area?
Yes.
I've had a lot of residents ask me kind of what's going to happen to that area. And it's unclear because it's undesignated. And so if that area, south of the border off of Murdoch, which becomes Baker, if somebody wanted to come in and develop that, what process would go through? I know you had a couple of lots right there, just where the boundary is on Murdoch there, as possible redevelopment. So,
right now it's undesignated. It's not in the urban growth boundary.
Right. It's not a rural.
So it's going to be, it's not in the rural reserves, but it's still rural. It's still regulated by the county and the county's rural farm rules.
Right. You also cross into Clackamas County there.
It is Clackamas County. That I don't know if you can see that, but that red line is the difference between Clackamas County and Washington County. And frankly, I'm not super familiar with the Clackamas County processes. I imagine they're fairly similar to Washington County's. So for someone to develop at an urban density, I think would be very unlikely until and unless the urban reserve areas were used up or identified as unrealistic. And Metro had to expand beyond what they have available within those urban reserve areas, and they had to look elsewhere. The only places that they could look would be undesignated areas, or potentially density increases inside the cities.
So I think to underscore that a little bit, I mean, Metro did a very lengthy public process to figure this out and ultimately ended up in the grand bargain. But their calculations show that they won't need that area within 50 years. But if they did make a mistake, or if something like, Damascus, the issues that are going on in Damascus, and if, they missed the amount of development that they could have, they kind of gave themselves some buffer so that within that 50-year period, they wouldn't have to go back through the whole urban reserve process in order to figure that out. But their intent stated very clearly, and maybe in law, is that they will not do anything with the undesignated areas until the urban reserve areas are filled.
Councilor Grant?
Julia, so our attention has been on Brookman, obviously, for many years, and it's our impression that there's pressure on Metro, decade by decade. Something has to happen in every direction, or at least in a lot of directions, and they got to be looking at that, right? And yet the last election, the property owners came forward themselves and wanted to be annexed, and for the second time in a row, it failed. So, but you say, well, sometime in the next 5 years. I'm not so sure I have the same ambition that you have, or the same confidence that that's going to happen. But I mean, just hypothetically, what would happen? I mean, if everybody's, at least Metro, is looking at that piece of land year after year, and it potentially could continue to be, fail at the ballot, what would happen?
There are, I don't want to scare people, but especially in Washington County, there are options for the county to allow urban development not in a city, which is why I was kind of alluding to, having, there are certain tools that we have in place that allow us to have a little bit more control. Bull Mountain is not in the city of Tigard. Right. It was developed, and I'm not saying the county isn't currently going in that direction, but they may have pressure to do that in the future. North Bethany is another example of an area that is likely to develop not inside a city. It certainly is an issue.
Aloha, or much of Aloha outside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are certainly a lot of areas in Washington County that are developed at very urban densities that are not inside a city. And it's possible. I don't see that in the very near future, but it's possible that that Metro or the county, or Metro could put pressure on the county to allow that kind of development in the Brookman inside areas in the UGB. Again, that's not the direction they're currently going.
Sure,
so
I'm just looking way down the road if that keeps happening. That's all I'm saying. I mean, obviously, if it changed,
Yeah.
It seems to me that if they did that, then the property owners would have little incentive to want to be annexed at that point, because they'd say, we're just going to do it without you, right? I mean, that's what happened at Bull Mountain. Right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
If that happens, how does that affect property taxes and other services and that sort of thing?
Well, I can only speak. I can speak to my experience when I worked at the city of Tigard when they were trying to annex Bull Mountain, and it was very difficult. The areas in Bull Mountain, as Councilor Grant said, were developed, had homes on them, but were paying county taxes. They were not paying city taxes, and so it was very difficult for people to want to come into the city and pay city taxes. It's at the city level, there is a certain burden that's placed on city resources through intergovernmental agreements with providing first responder services. There's impacts to the libraries and things like that. I can't say specifically in this area what those impacts are, but there is a difference. You're not paying city taxes if you're not in the city, but being so close to the city, you are using city resources.
Parks.
Yeah, parks too.
So, Julia, can you go back to your, everybody take a look at this and see the big blue areas, but Julia, can you go back to your, that exhibit with your, I think it's with Josie.
Yeah.
Can I just want to talk about this a little bit and just make it really clear from a citizen involvement perspective of, where people can really plug into this process and where points are, where things can happen. Because a lot of times we hear, oh, well, the decision was already made and I didn't have an opportunity to say anything. And so I guess, when you're looking at that big area blue and a 50-year plan, obviously there's a lot of time for people to have input and to talk about the process. And I really want to point out a couple things because the process has changed. It's different today than it was when we did the Brookman area or even the area around the new Ridges schools because in those particular cases, the urban growth boundary happened before you did the concept planning. And Metro has changed that. And so I just want to make sure that people understand where those points are for public input and where, where the city really does have control over certain things. So the urban rural reserve, which is the first line there, the 10 to 50 year plan, that's pretty much done, except for the undesignated areas, which we talked about. That's pretty much done. But the next step that comes is the concept plan, and that's different than what it's been in the past because it used to be the urban growth boundary decision. And so one of the things I think we learned about the Brookman area in particular is you probably should do some concept planning and making sure that there aren't barriers to development, which we saw in the Brookman area because the cost to develop out there is relatively high compared to some other potential areas that might have been more developable. And so that turned into be, I think, one of the reasons that Brookman is struggling with a lot of other reasons. But what has happened now is the concept plan comes before urban growth boundary designations. And so that's the process we're entering into and the West Sherwood concept plan that's being done. And so that's taking a look at a very big area over a 50-year period of time. And coming out of that will be information that will help Metro and to some extent the city decide on what those urban growth boundaries are going to look like in the next few rounds of urban growth boundary expansions, which will happen over, the next 10 years. And so, certainly there will be a lot of opportunities for involvement in the concept planning as it goes forward. But it's just a concept plan. It's really not getting to that next level of deciding, okay, well, we're bringing this into the urban growth boundary, which is something that is a big step and needs a lot of community input and involvement too, because once it's brought in the urban growth boundary, that's a decision point where I think ultimately Metro makes those decisions, but certainly they're going to listen to the local jurisdictions and make sure that their goals and aspirations are being met during the process and you're not bringing in too little or too much. So, as you move down this process, annexation is another process where, that's probably where citizens have and council has the most control, simply because it requires a vote of the citizens of Sherwood and it requires, an ordinance passed by council in order to be annexed. Julie mentioned the caveat to that is if you don't annex it for 2 lot, then, it might develop under county rules, but certainly the cities have a lot of ability and the citizens have a lot of input into that process. After you get past that, it's not so much because land use application and building permits are really based on meeting certain criteria in the code, and as long as developers come and meet that criteria in the code, by state law, those plans have to be approved. So I just kind of wanted to give a context to people that are listening or looking at this to understand where they can plug in, where it's really important to plug in, and each one of these pieces is important. But probably the UGB expansion and the annexation of those 2 points where the city gets to make some decisions about what they want for their future. And it's really important that we understand and people know what it is that we want such that growth can happen in a controlled manner over a long period of time.
And I'll just highlight, again, probably more for the public than the council, but the council as well, that it's really important, too, to be aware that most of those decisions at the points where it's really important, other than the annexation, is Metro or other entities, and so making sure that people are paying attention to notices that they get from Metro. If there's stuff, and we certainly will, continue to try to get that information out through our websites and articles and things like that. But for people to be aware. oh, they're talking about an urban reserve, or they're talking about, the urban growth report, or they're talking about the urban growth boundary. Those are really important things for people to be paying attention to because that affects how we grow in the future. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Under new business, Resolution 2014-056, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract for the Southwest Lincoln Street Pavement Rehabilitation Project. Craig.
Good evening. So this is the next part of Lincoln Street. We've been doing.
Yeah, that microphone's
Oh,
off.
is this the one that's messed up? So this is the next phase of the Lincoln Street project, where I'm currently putting the storm system in that you approved here about a month ago. So really, this is one of our worst streets in the city. It's been in need of repair for quite a while. It's really from Willamette, it's on Lincoln Street from Willamette to Division Street. We actually need to amend this resolution as we go through it, because we just opened the bids today and checked everything out. So I'd like to amend the resolution for the last whereas should read, city staff recommends city council authorize the city manager to execute a construction contract with the lowest responsive bidder in the amount of $252,148.81 plus 10% contingency, construction contingency. Likewise, I'd like to go down to section 1 in the resolution. City manager is hereby authorized to execute a construction contract with the lowest responsive bidder in the amount of $252,148.81 plus 10% construction contingency upon completion of the mandatory 7-day protest period for the completion of Southwest Lincoln Street pavement rehabilitation project. We did receive one bid today. We had 5 contractors that attended the mandatory bid requirement that we had in our RFP when we went out to bid. And it is a little bit over the engineer's estimate, but I think there's quite a bit of work outside just the paving since we're widening the road just a little bit. We got to move mailboxes back and some of those things. So I think it's within our budget. I know that for sure, and I think it's a decent bid to approve.
Move we amend Resolution 2014-056 as stated by Mr. Sheldon.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None?
Now you'll need a motion to approve the
Move
amended
we approve
resolution.
Resolution 2014-056 as amended.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Our next new business is ordinance 2014-014, amending Sherwood Municipal Code, Chapter 8.08, Alarm Systems. Julie Blums.
Council, during the budget process, we talked about changing this ordinance to eliminate the need for our citizens to obtain alarm permits for their security systems. We went through a process to try to determine, one, why we were requiring this, and two, was it providing a benefit to the community, and was it cost effective? And what we determined is that it was no on all 3 counts. So for once, we're going to actually eliminate something and eliminate a fee and become more efficient. What we're going to do is alarm permits are not going to be required anymore by citizens. And what we've done is we've changed the code to say that if you have more than 2 false alarms in a calendar year, it will become a code violation instead of an invoice that finance would send you. It's something that the police department will issue a citation, and it'll just go through our municipal court process. So that's what we have up for you tonight.
Mayor, if there's no council discussion, then you can ask for a motion to,
Do we
move
did you
forward.
want to say?
I actually have a question.
We have some questions.
I have a question for Julie. So can you please tell me the difference between the pricing that you were charging for the permit as opposed to the fine for having it go off the third time?
Yes, so the initial price to obtain an alarm permit is $100. And then there's a $25 renewal fee each year after that. And then there is the fine for false alarms, depending on the number you receive, was between $50 and $500. So as you progressed down the path of more and more alarms, false alarms, the price went up. So now it's just going to be, it's a Class D violation, which right now is $110. So that's what the violation will be if you receive more than 2 in a calendar year.
I just want a clarification. Because you initially said $50 to $500, but then you said $110 for the first time. So
Yeah, the current fees are between $50 to $500, depending on how many false alarms you receive in a year.
Okay.
This new ordinance will.
Got it.
The new citation amount is $110.
okay, just flat 110. Yep, got it.
Council President Henderson.
So on the third false alarm is when an officer will issue a false alarm permit?
Well,
I mean, false alarm fine?
Yes.
Okay. And then the resident will either pay the fine or come to municipal court and talk to Judge Jack?
Yes.
Okay. So you're taking the alarm registration out of the fee schedule and putting it under Muni Court?
Yes.
Okay. And what other items are a Class D violation, just out of curiosity?
Class D, from my reading of the code, is actually a catch-all. It's an undesignated, so anything that's not designated as a Class A, B, or C falls usually under that undesignated category.
It's the lowest.
Thank you,
class
Microsoft.
can
You're
have.
welcome. Is that clear? Clear enough for you?
Much better.
Yeah, so like failure to have your backflow tested, is that a municipal court
No, they just cut off your water.
violation? Okay. So that's its own
Yeah. it's a whole-
repercussion?
Yeah, and there's a
Okay.
restore fee and everything else.
I was just
too.
trying to think
Yeah.
of something that could compare.
To put in perspective, the last couple of years, the dollar amount
That's my
in
neck.
fine revenue we have assessed in a year, last year was $800 total.
Whole year.
So, which is why we looked at this and said, is this really needed? Do we, need to be sending out $25 invoices to, a third of our population every year?
Right.
It's just not cost effective. There's no reason to do it. We don't have a false alarm issue in this town, and that's really the premise for why cities do this process, so.
And will this be across the board for commercial as well as residential?
Yes.
Okay, so same fee,
Yep.
same schedule?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll move we read caption and adopt ordinance 2014-014.
Second?
Ordinance 2014-014, amending Sherwood Municipal Code, Chapter 8.08, Alarm Systems. Counselor Clark?
Aye.
Counselor Langer?
Aye.
Counselor Butterfield is absent. Counselor Folsom is absent. Counselor Grant?
Aye.
Council President Henderson?
Aye.
Mayor Middleton?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, under public hearings, we're going to start with ordinance 2014-013, approving a planned unit development to be known as Cedar Brook Planned Unit Development, including application of a planned unit development overlay on the comprehensive plan and zone map, and approving the 65-lot subdivision. The public hearing is continued from July 15, 2004.
Oops. I don't really have an official presentation this evening. I just wanted to update the council on what's transpired since the last public hearing that we held on July 15th regarding the Cedarbrook Planned Unit Development, which is a 65-lot subdivision. And council granted the request to hold the record open till tonight's hearing. Your packet materials include the proposed ordinance, the Planning Commission recommendation, and several new exhibits labeled R through U in your packet materials. Exhibit R is a staff memo with some additional recommended conditions and several comments regarding some of the statements that were made at the last hearing. Exhibit S is an email from Joe Broadhurst to council. Exhibit T is a revised layout prepared by the applicant concerning the water quality facility, and Exhibit U is a review of the revised layout by the city engineer concerning the stormwater treatment facility. So since the packet materials were prepared, an additional email from Eric Valdez was sent to the council that referenced the Cedarbrook PUD along with some other issues. Although it gives no indication that the writer intended to be official comments, we decided to err on the side of caution, and including that is part of your decision-making process, and it will be included as Exhibit V, and I have it prepared here.
I'm sorry, I believe that was already transmitted to council via email, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Right, council received it on July 29th. So to highlight a few issues from the staff memo, I wanted to talk a little bit about the process for the planned unit development. This is a subdivision application along with the planned unit development. So you will be reviewing the planned unit development along with the subdivision application if approved, and approving that preliminary plat. If approved, it goes back to the Planning Commission for what's called a final development review. So they'll take a look in very close detail of the designs, the community design standards. There'll be an architectural pattern book, and the final plat will be reviewed at that time. It will be a Type 4 process. There'll be notice as well as the public hearing process. So at the last hearing, the applicant considered changing their water quality facility design for the stormwater treatment and convert Track C into the water quality facility from an open space area to the water quality facility. So after that hearing, they've officially submitted plans that you have as Exhibit T proposing that the water quality facility be located on Track C. So Bob has reviewed that. That's your Exhibit U, showing that it is feasible to move the water quality facility, but it changes the area of open space, which used to be approximately 21% of the site, down to 19% of the area, which is still meeting the open space requirement. And when you look at where that open space area is, it was right at the corner of the property, so there weren't really any, it wasn't really usable open space. It was a landscaped area, and that will also be similar in appearance with the water quality facility. So based on that, staff proposed adding condition E9 to the Planning Commission recommendation. So to talk a little bit about the feeder trails, the applicant has proposed several areas of feeder trails throughout the project, as well as an additional trail along the city property to connect with other local trails. We talked about that at the last hearing. And the applicant mentioned that they were considering a soft surface trail, but our transportation system plan design standards show that the trail would need to be comprised of a hard surface. And so we'd ask that that language be added to the proposal on, let's see, I think it's condition G7 to include the language hard surface, so that it reads, Phase 2 portion of the project consists of design and construction of a hard surface trail. And also, after further review of some of the open space areas within the project, staff recommends adding a condition that allows for pedestrian and bicycle access to the public throughout the site on all of those open space walkways and private streets to improve circulation throughout the site. And so that condition would be marked E10. And then prior to the approval of the final plat, provide a pedestrian and bicycle access easement over all the tracks that include a private pathway or a private street. In addition to that, staff contacted Clean Water Services and talked to them about the private dog park being located so close to the vegetated corridor. And their response was that they have issued a Clean Water Service provider letter, which is typical for when you're close to the vegetated corridor. And they, one of their provisions and recommended conditions would be to include signage along the boundary of that vegetated corridor, indicating that you're near a vegetated corridor, make sure that nothing passes that barrier. And so that already was a condition as part of the recommendations from Clean Water Services, and so we would incorporate that as well into the recommendation. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for staff from council?
Okay.
None. The applicant. Does the applicant want to come forward on this?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Steve Miller, D.R. Horton, 4380 Southwest Macadam Avenue, Suite 100, Portland, Oregon, 97239. Thank you, staff, for that. That's very helpful in helping catch everybody up where we're at today. Some of those conditions were a little new to me. I haven't heard them yet. And so in terms of the public access over all the tracks, I guess our only request would be that the public access is just on the trails and not over the track as a whole. Obviously, we're going to have amenities in these tracks that are going to be for the residents of this subdivision, and we don't want to have it become a situation where, you know, the whole public comes in and takes advantage of these amenities, because the residents that live in this subdivision will be responsible for maintaining them. And so we don't want to add that additional burden to them to have to maintain for the public as a whole. So that would be one request, that the public access is just over the trails within those tracks. And then to address the stormwater retention pond, that is only going to be on a portion of that tract. So it, as staff has indicated, it will still function as open space as it originally was intended, with landscaping and so forth. It was more of a passive open space in the corner of the project. So I just want to make sure you knew it wasn't taking the whole tract up, just a portion of it. The other thing I'd like to request is, I have not seen the conditions of approval that are being proposed. So if we could get a copy of that information, that would be helpful, just so we can look through it tonight and make sure we don't have any additional comments to make. But after hearing what they had to say, I don't believe we have a problem with any of them, other than what I've already commented on when it comes to the access. Other than that, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have from the last hearing or from today.
Council President
Maybe I could
Henderson.
just ask Mr. Miller a clarifying question. So you haven't seen the recommended conditions document? Does that mean that you want to review that and postpone the decision?
No, I was just wondering if I could get a copy and just look at them tonight, and then if we had any comments, we could just make a statement, and I think we would be done. I don't think there's anything that would be cause a delay for the decision tonight. We just have not read through them in their entirety. But again, having heard what staff read, I'm not hearing any major issues.
Do you want to provide him with one?
Yeah, it's just 3 pages.
Yeah, we absolutely will, and I guess what I would suggest is we'll make sure that he has this, and if you take additional public testimony, and then he can respond in his
Correct.
rebuttal time.
Exactly.
I've had a request to take a 10-minute break. That way you'll have the opportunity to review that. Would that work for you? And then we'll come back and open the public hearing and close the public hearing. So
absolutely, if that
we'll
works
take
for
a
everybody,
10-minute
that would be
break.
great.
We'll be back at 8:40.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to begin again. I'm going to open up the public hearing to see if any more public comment on this. Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Let the applicant come back up, yeah.
there we go. I just wanted to follow up and let you know that staff and us have met on those conditions, and everything is good to go now. So thank you very much for that time.
All right, thank you. I am now going to close the public hearing, and now staff will return.
Thank you. So in looking at the staff memo, which is Exhibit R, the proposed conditions, the applicant has indicated agreement with that, with the exception of the last condition found on page 63 of your packet, what's marked as Exhibit 9. I mean, why do I keep saying Exhibit? E9, but I'd like it to be E10. And if I could read into the record the proposed condition. So it would read, prior to approval of the final plat, provide pedestrian and bicycle access easements over all of the pathways within the tracks and private streets that include a pathway or a private street. So it limits it to the walkways exclusively and not the other areas within the different tracks.
Okay. Questions from the council to staff?
I just have a clarification on that same page, 63, where they talk about a condition of hard trail.
Yes.
So I see that staff has final occupancy for either the last townhome building or the last 3 single-family homes shall be granted once the trail extension has been constructed and accepted by the city engineer.
Right. So we created what we're calling a phase 2 because the lead item of a trail might take some time to get through the permitting process and approval process. So we wanted to give the applicant an opportunity to get started on the development. And so this lets them begin both processes simultaneously, but still holds their feet to the fire with respect to completing everything with the last townhomes or the 3 individual lots, and that would be their choice.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, we weren't doing that because we didn't think the developer was going to do the trail, only the trail, we know, can take a long time to get permitted and approved, so.
That's correct.
Okay.
That was our
So,
intent.
back to your, I was a little confused. You said you wanted to amend E9?
Well, the last condition on page 63 was labeled E9, but it should be E10. It's an additional condition, and I misnumbered it in the report.
No questions for staff. I bring it back to council. Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Do we need to, can we just approve it like it is? Or do we have to make a motion to amend because you've made changes since last week? Or what's the procedure for approving it if we want to approve right now?
So did you want to say that?
So, I'm sorry, so what you have in front of you is the staff memorandum with some proposed conditions if you decide to approve the application. And the one recommendation, staff just described a change to what's in her memorandum in the recommended condition. So if you decide to approve, you can approve with the conditions described by staff on the record tonight and in the memorandum, and that would pick up the change that she just read into the record.
But do we need to amend the ordinance? Or do we just need to make note?
I don't think so,
look at the
because
ordinance.
the ordinance basically talks about Planning Commission Exhibit 1, and
Right.
these changes that she proposed here and these recommended conditions are a part of Exhibit 1 of the Planning Commission recommendation. So if you do what Chris recommended, that those will get picked up, it'll be modified in the conditions of Exhibit 1 and move forward.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the ordinance in front of me. That's correct. The ordinance doesn't include this memorandum.
Do I have any council comments? The only comment I have is that this is a unique piece of property, and this isn't something we'll have in all throughout the city. So I want the public to know this is a unique piece of property and a difficult piece of property. So to me, it really fits in that piece. So other than that, I have no comments.
Mayor, Councilor, is there a motion to move forward?
I'll try. Chris, you can jump right in.
Okay.
I move we read caption. Oops, I don't have the right page. Which one? I move we read caption and adopt ordinance 2014-013 with including the amendments noted by by staff.
The conditions of approval described in the staff memorandum and as described in the record.
That's my motion,
tonight.
what Chris just said.
Second.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Ordinance 2014-013, approving a planned unit development PUD to be known as the Cedar Brook Planned Unit Development, including application of a planned unit development overlay on the comprehensive plan and zone map, and approving the 65-lot subdivision. Counselor Clark?
Aye.
Counselor Butterfield is absent. Counselor Langer?
Aye.
Counselor Folsom is absent. Counselor Grant?
Aye.
Council President Henderson?
Aye.
Mayor Middleton?
Aye.
Thank you.
Our next business is Resolution 2014-057, approving ballot titles and explanatory statements and submitting proposed charter amendments to the city voters. Mr. Pesserman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn this over to Bill Kabizman, who has been working on this process along with Pat Allen and the committee that's been putting this together. So most of these ballot titles and explanatory statements are pretty well stated, and they are meant to be so that the public can understand them. So I don't think there's necessarily a large explanation, but I'll turn it over to them if they have any comments.
Thank you. My name's Bill Kabizman. I'm an attorney with Garvey Schubert Bear. I believe you worked with my colleague Ed Sullivan in a work session last month as you reviewed these. As the systems manager indicated, the relatively self-explanatory changes to the charter that your charter review committee developed and put together. We were asked to come in and help put the documents together, get it in forms for the ballot title and explanatory statement, and that's what we did. I do want to point out you should have received a new version tonight that had a few Scrivener's errors in it. I think they're all marked and highlighted, relatively straightforward. If you have questions about any of them, please let me know. But I think it was some carry through as different documents were used. But otherwise, these should be ready to go to the voters, and I'll let your committee chair talk about the specifics if you'd like.
Thanks, Mayor Middleton, members of the council. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm the chair of the Charter Review Committee. Just in brief, to kind of give you a rundown, as you know, you called together a Charter Review Committee made up of representatives of the major city advisory committees and some citizen members about a year ago. And we presented a package of 5 different amendments to you previously that you put on the May ballot, all of which related generally to things that would be important in the upcoming election. Those all passed by substantial margins. Those included things like moving away from election by position to election by a single list, requiring you to review and adopt rules, requiring you to accept public comment at council meetings and those kinds of issues. There are 7 items that represent the remainder of our work that we have presented to you and would encourage you to put on the ballot. I won't go into great detail about them, but just briefly, the first is, in addition to changing the title of the charter itself, which used to refer to, or which currently refers to a year, just calling it the city charter, it would require periodic review of the charter. So you would be required at least every 6 years to convene a similar kind of a group, which you could construct, you or a future council could construct however you chose to, but that would look at the charter and make similar recommendations if any were appropriate. The second is to clarify what the procedure is for putting people on boards and commissions for the city. Right now, there's some procedure, some historical practice, some rule, and some charter provisions. What we try to do in the charter is clarify that the mayor makes an appointment to a board or commission, and that's subject to a majority vote of the council. So we think it strengthens and clarifies the notion that it's a joint function that occurs. The third has to do with setting the agenda. Currently, the mayor largely controls the agenda for the city council. What we want to do is add a provision that says a majority of the council can cause an item to be brought to a future agenda. So if 4 out of the 7 of you really want to talk about something, a single mayor can't keep that from being talked about. It requires it to be a future agenda so that if there are notice requirements and those kinds of things, those can be dealt with. So you can't bring something suddenly on a current agenda, but you can bring it to a future agenda. The fourth it moves us from a procedure used tonight on the alarm ordinance to adopt an ordinance in a single reading and a single meeting and require that you bring it back over 2 meetings. So you have notice, you read an ordinance at a first meeting, and you have to wait to the next meeting to be able to actually take action to adopt it. It does provide an emergency provision so that if the 7 of you unanimously believe it's urgent, you can do it without the second reading, but it would have to be a unanimous vote of all the occupied council positions to do that. The fifth change is there's a current provision in the charter that prohibits councilors and the mayor from interfering or placing undue influence on city staff. Nothing changes about that. There is a provision, however, that says violation of that can cause, if a majority of the council so finds, can cause that mayor or council member to be removed from the council, and we recommend a change to delete that provision. The sixth is a clarification of an issue that gets some discussion periodically, and that's the city attorney. Right now, there's language about city attorney that we believe needs to be clarified to provide that the city attorney can either be a city employee or a law firm contracted by the city to provide those services. And so we add some language that tries to deal with both of those kinds of circumstances, and it's at the discretion of the council to do that or not. And then the last provision, basically, the city charter today is silent on pay for councilors. It does provide that you're entitled to expenses. We make 2 changes. One is that we prohibit pay. By prohibiting it in charter, what that really does is it accomplishes the notion that for councilors to be paid, it would need to be done by a vote of the people. That would be in the form of a charter amendment. You'd have to either say delete that provision and let there be pay, whatever it is, or you'd have to have a specific proposal. And then the other is it takes the existing notion of being reimbursed for expenses, which is more or less unsideboarded, and says reasonable expenses. And so that's a term that in expense world is a kind of a known and defined term, and basically says you don't get just whatever you want. There's some notion of it's got to be the ordinary kinds of things. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have if they're easy, and he'll get the hard ones.
There's one more. No, actually, the only thing I have is on page 2 of 2. You took out confirming amendment, and it's just would it be an amendment, an, rather than just a amendment?
Mayor, it should have confirming changed to conforming.
Oh, okay.
And that was just a typo.
I see it now. Yeah. Okay. Good. Do I have any questions from council?
Want me to go first? Okay. Thank you, Chair Allen. I have concerns about essentially Exhibit B, which is the appointment of board and committees by the mayor, which is a change from the council, from the previous charter that says the council appoints members of commission, boards, and committees. So I have a concern about that, how that would affect potentially a new council that will be sitting in January, and wanted to discuss with council whether or not we thought that might be a charter revision, one of the 7 that might be needed to be reviewed by the new council who will be sitting in January, since that's who it will primarily affect. And also, the Exhibit E, which is the section about coercion that Chair Allen talked about. Currently, obviously, that's something that in my tenure has never been used, to remove an elected official who's guilty of coercion after a public hearing is how it's currently worded, and we've never used that in the time that I've been on the council or been affiliated with the city since 1999. My concern about that is if we have somebody who is in a position, a councilor or a mayor, who is guilty of that, there really is no other consequence other than censure, and censure is basically a function of council rules, and we've been told that council rules are enforceable by us but have no legal binding nature. And so when I think about that provision, or perhaps why that provision was in there, it's sort of a function of if you have an employee who is coercing other employees or other peers, that is a liability for the organization or the corporation like the city, and the remedy for that shouldn't be something that takes months and months to resolve. Obviously, removing somebody from office would be, of course, a last resort, in my opinion. The process would obviously be if somebody was accused of that, then there would be some sort of investigation or inquiry, and then both parties would have the opportunity to represent themselves, and then the council as a whole would obviously weigh in on whether or not there's a consequence for that behavior. So in my opinion, based on council rules, the consequence for being guilty, proven guilty of coercion, would be censure by council rules. Other than that, there's no consequence outside of the provision that's in the charter. And as a city councilor, one of the responsibilities that I take very seriously is to protect the city, its assets, from liabilities, civil or criminal. And so those are my two initial concerns, but I would like to hear from other councilors, and would also maybe like to talk a little bit about the ballot title that's on Exhibit G, which talks about council compensation. And since members of council weren't part of that, maybe you could share some of the discussions that the Charter Review Committee had, since I don't think everybody was at the work session.
So if I could respond to a couple of those points, and now that I'm getting beyond describing what they do into what our reasoning was, there was a large and diverse group, and we often had differing reasons for
some of them are here.
coming to the same position. Some of those folks are here. And if I stray too far, I'm sure I can be corrected, but I'll do my best to capture what I think was the general sense. In terms of the council appointment issue, as you know, our current process sort of looks like what we talk about putting in the charter, but the charter doesn't really say it. The piece that's in the charter now is the 4 votes on council to get you on a board or commission. The rest of it is a mix of the way we've always done things, the way various mayors have, in some cases, in changing fashion, done things over time. It's a little bit of the function of the mayor's control of the agenda currently. That allows an appointment to come. Remember, we sort of short circuit that a little bit by allowing the agenda to be changed at a future point by a majority of the council.
Assuming it passes.
Assuming it passes, right? And so we thought it was appropriate to add a little bit more form to what's in the charter. The mayor and the council all have a seat at the table for making appointments to boards and commissions, but still allowing those things that happen up to the point that the mayor makes that appointment to be handled through council rules or customary practice or whatever makes sense to mayor and council at that time. We didn't talk, frankly, about the notion of maybe the future council should consider this because it would affect the future council. That's a little bit of a circular argument, in my opinion, that any council could look forward and say, well, once we put that on the ballot, it could be the next council. And I think ultimately it's not so much that it affects the council, it's that it affects the city and the citizens. So my argument would be put it on the ballot and let the citizens make a decision about that. And whether which council it does or doesn't affect, it really ultimately it gets to be the citizens' call. And that's the way I would err on that point. The coercion section took a lot of our time in discussion, and I guess I'd make a couple of points. One that's important not to get lost is an important protection provided by the coercion provision is for employees potentially being coerced by a member of the council. That's something that they can point to that says, I'm not going to do what you're telling me to do. I work for the city manager.
Right.
And you know, if you're going to take action against me for not listening to you, Counselor so and so, you can't do that, right? So there's that protection that I think kind of gets lost in the political discussion of is someone trying to wield inappropriate influence. I'll just tell you my personal belief, and the biggest challenge I have with that removal provision is it allows 4 members of the council to short circuit an election and basically say, because of whatever set of circumstances those 4 people find, they're going to remove somebody from office who's been elected by the citizens. You know, I think we continue to have recall provisions. We continue to have election terms for the mayor. It's a very short term, 2 years, as I'm sure Mayor Middleton can attest, goes by in the blink of an eye, it seems. And that notion of there being this mechanism for people to actually do it, or even worse, for people to think about doing it, or for people to have been rumored to be thinking about doing it, or for people to be rumored to be thinking about fixing, about planning to do it. You know, in the times that I've lived here where I've seen this come up, there's been a fair amount of chaos caused by stuff that I don't think was even real. But it's this nettlesome, frankly, anti-democratic provision that I think doesn't help us at all, and can cause some challenge. But again, in that case, I would suggest put it to the voters and see if see what the community thinks about whether that's a useful tool for a majority of the council to have or not.
So in your rebuttal, I guess, not really rebuttal, but so you talk about how the council, clarifying the process of appointments, that the council is a part of appointments, but in reality, the council only votes aye or nay. Because the mayor appoints
Currently
to boards
and in this proposal, right?
Right. And so the mayor controls the agenda to a certain extent. And so names can be withheld from the agenda because it's not an appointment of council, it's an appointment by the mayor. And hence lies my concern.
Well, conversely, and I don't mean to try to get into a one-on-one discussion with you, but conversely, I'm not sure how a council appoints. How do a multiple group of people make an appointment, right? A multiple group of people take action.
Right.
It seems the language today is unclear and has been the source of some recent friction and confusion about what is the process. And we think we capture much of what is in current process, but codify it in the charter through this proposal.
And it wouldn't
I would disagree
preclude.
with that. I would say your change actually exacerbates the problem that we had this last year, because it comes right out and says the mayor does the appointing, and that's exactly where the problem was. Is the mayor was trying to do the appointing when the council does it, and so I think you just made it worse.
Well, I guess I would respectfully suggest that we may or may not have made it worse. I think we clarified it. Now, the result of the clarification may be to some people not a good clarification. To others, it may be an appropriate clarification.
For those of us sitting right in the middle of it, you made it worse.
That's
no doubt. I understand from being on the fringe and not understanding what really went on. You might think you made it better, but no.
Well, Counselor, you and I might have different definitions of the fringe. And again, I would suggest that this would be a clear answer to that question, and you ought to put that clear answer to the voters and let them decide how would they like the system to operate.
And it doesn't preclude the council from voting no to the nominee. So they still have a voice in it.
But it precludes it precludes moving forward in a deadlock, and that's what we were able. That the system we have now, the will of council can move forward. And in this, I agree with Councilor Langer that the will of council cannot move forward, and we're stuck. And there's no getting around being stuck in what you're suggesting. And I agree. It makes it worse. We resolved our issues in the last year. You're right. There were times that we had a hard time making whatever appointment one way or the other, but we got through it. And this makes it would take away our ability to get through it. And we to this day may or may not have gotten through those things. And I just don't see a way out. And the elected officials on council ought to have a way out with the will of council. And it's not here. And so I agree. I think this makes it worse.
I'm not sure you have it in the current charter either.
Say again?
I'm not sure you have it in the current charter either.
I think, I mean, I
But
respectfully.
we're getting through it. It works. I'm sorry, just.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me finish.
I'll let you finish.
Somehow it works. And so, charter or not, when things aren't in the charter, then it's the will of council. And the will of council is making it work now. And we get through it. And this takes away that provision where the will of council could move forward with the solution. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I wanted to let you finish. Okay, so I respectfully disagree with Councilor Grant because the way that we moved through it was with an illegal motion, according to our attorney, Chris Crean. So I don't think that the current way that we have it is better than the cleanup that I think that Chair Allen and the group has put before us. I think that it is a clarification. I think that the group's done a great job, and I appreciate your work with this. And I don't see this as a worsening. I see it as a clarification of a situation that is cumbersome.
I'd be happy to answer.
Probably an improvement to the current system, Pat. This just isn't it.
Yeah.
So-
I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might.
So by replacing the word council with the word mayor, how does that streamline the process? Because currently the process that we've had in the past has been, we advertise for board and commission openings. The chair of the committee, say the Cultural Arts Commission, the staff liaison, and the council liaison review applicants, make a choice. They refer that up to the mayor, usually with the application, and then the mayor agrees or disagrees with, putting that person on the consent agenda for appointment.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that it does streamline that process. I think what it does is codifies that exact process, or at least it codifies the portion from the recommendation to the mayor on. Whatever you do to get a recommendation to the mayor continues to be as it is today, some mix
Right.
of history and tradition and council rules and those kinds of things.
Right. And then you add the subject to the consent of city council by resolution. Correct?
Mm-hmm. So I think you basically could lay that process out in a map, and you could have an overlay that says portion of this process covered in the charter. You haven't changed the process at all. You've just moved the amount covered by the charter one step further in the process.
Right. I think difficulty sometimes is that process is not referenced in the charter anywhere.
I don't think that negates cleaning up the process from the position that it's at.
So just a point of clarification, I want to make sure that, Pat Allen is here representing a committee that made recommendations to you guys for your consideration tonight, and Bill is here as an attorney for those. So what happened a little bit with the special committee, and what I want to make sure doesn't happen tonight, is the deliberation portion of what you guys want to do as yours trips over into their time. So if you have questions relative to what they discussed as a committee, that would probably be good to talk with Pat. And if you have questions relative to the crafting of the ordinance or the legislation, that would be appropriate for Bill. But then you probably want to close that and then consider your issues, with your own deliberations between council. So, and thank you, Julie. It is also a public hearing, so you probably want to hear from the public as well.
Oh, yeah. Why don't we?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did I have public that would like to speak on this? Ms. Boswell.
I'm Dean Boswell, 22796 Southwest Lincoln Street, Sherwood, Oregon. There's a lot of stuff in here. and some of it I'm going to go back and read. It gets kind of confusing. But one thing that I want to, I just want to, I can't say I speak for all the people, but we elect officials, and if they are doing, referring to the coercion, if we have a city council member or an elected official of any type that is using their position to influence, I personally don't see any other way but to remove them. They're not living up to what they promised as a public official, and I know it's put in here as a suggestion, but just a reminder that that you guys are all elected officials and we trust you, and if you're going to break that trust, we really don't want you. So not saying any of you did that, I'm just saying if that happens, that as a citizen, I wouldn't want you. So just a reminder. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Bevel.
Anthony Bevel, Sherwood. I just have a question. A short while ago, there was a budget committee that was formed, and there were 3 people nominated. And, you can see the politics there. There were some people there who were strongly against, what was happening over across the street, across the way with Walmart. And I think the way I'm thinking, and a number of people are thinking, that Councilwoman Folsom, she, made the motion to table those 3 nominees, citizen nominees, from participating in this committee. So how does that fit into what you were just talking about? I mean, who made the nominations, and why were these people tabled, and why aren't you continuing? Where are we with this subject right now? That's my question. Thanks.
Well, she didn't say no. She just wanted some questions answered, and I believe now they are still being answered at this time. Once they're all answered, then we have the option of bringing them back. So they weren't said no to. It was just she had some questions on clarification of the process, and we're looking into that now.
So does this have something to do with what we were just talking about? I mean, who nominated these 3 people, who approved them, and why, why were they?
He hadn't talked to any of us, so it's a good example, so yes.
I don't believe that's exactly true, but that's your opinion. But what it is she asked for some clarification, much like I've got going on the next agenda. Some, I believe there are, I don't know what appointments there are, but I think we have 2 or 3 coming up, and I didn't know who they were till I read them on the agenda. So you can read them on the agenda, but I was not contacted. So I take a lot of faith in the committee. And so, but she did not say, I don't want those people on. I just want that clarified. She just wanted clarification of the process, and we're getting that right now. It's getting to the point we'll have that clarification pretty soon.
So, may I weigh in? Yeah. So normally what has happened in the past is we advertise for appointments, people apply, and then the committee, which would be the council liaison, the staff liaison, and the chair of that committee would sit down and they'd interview everybody who applied. And then usually they sit down just like a job interview, and they say, these are my first 2 choices, these are my first 2 choices, and then those are forwarded up to the mayor. If appointments were forwarded to you and didn't make are on the agenda and they didn't go to you, then that's a breakdown of the process, because they always go to him, and he has the opportunity, whoever mayor is, to reach out to them, talk to them, ask them why they want to serve, or if he has questions about their application. So in the budget committee example, I think Councilor Folsom, there was the initial interviews were in January, a member was appointed, And then those people were either asked if they wanted to stay in the queue for future appointments. The other aspect of the process is when somebody serves on a board or a commission and their tenure is up, 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, like for the Planning Commission, they are usually offered the opportunity to reapply with the whole applicant pool if they want to after their second term. And some of those questions weren't apparent to us that had been done, and that's why Councilor Folsom asked staff to get back to us, and then those appointments and the information are going to come up on the next meeting, our next meeting in August, which is on the 19th? No. 19th, yeah. So we're revisiting that process on the 19th.
So you do interview candidates for committees? Every candidate?
Yes.
Because I don't believe that's true. No, I don't. In fact, I know it's not true because.
Well, the last time I'm the library liaison, and the last time we had an appointment, a vacancy, we had 9 people apply, and we interviewed 9 people. So I can only speak to myself. And we're interviewing Cultural Arts Commission appointments this week, and I assume everybody who applied will be interviewed. That's what we've always done.
Well, I challenge you on that because
Sure.
I applied for the Charter Committee review, and I never filled out the application, and I hurriedly did it because I was away out of state on a job, came back, hurriedly scribbled it out and gave it. I never was contacted, never was interviewed, so.
Okay, the Charter Review Committee is an ad hoc committee that we formed, and we didn't interview anybody for that committee. The 3 of us got together, 3 members of council and staff got together and made their choices because of the timeline we were on. And because it was an ad hoc committee, the mayor had his recommendations, and I think we agreed with every appointment except one, and we negotiated. I mean, that was a while ago. But because of the timeline we were on and wanting to get the committee up and running, we didn't interview anybody because of the time constraints. But for a standing board, budget, planning, cultural arts, parks, SERPAC, I have always interviewed every applicant because that's a position that lasts 2, 3, or 4 years long.
Okay.
So I apologize that you weren't interviewed. That's not a normal process for have you applied for a standing board?
No.
Parks board? Okay. So for an ad hoc committee, we were under a time constraint. And I felt bad that we didn't have time to interview, but I can't remember how many applicants we had, 11, I think.
Yeah, and the same for the special committee as well, which is an ad hoc committee. There were a lot of applicants, I think almost 20.
Each board and took a person off that.
Yeah, that was the charter, and then 3 at large.
Right.
Okay. So I stand corrected, and thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Harris?
Hi, Jennifer Harris, Sherwood, Oregon. This is maybe not this perfect time to talk about this, but it kind of goes with what we're speaking of. Volunteer committees, from my understanding, have no prerequisites. Everything I've read don't generally have prerequisites. So I could be wrong on some of them. I haven't read all of them. But my question is, if these are volunteers from the community who are expressing an interest, why are we interviewing them and what are we looking for? It should be maybe a lottery where you pull names out of a hat. But I think that there's definitely, it's no secret that there's a divide on the council, there's a divide in the city, and the numbers up there are always going to be 2 against 5. So at this point, the way council is going, anyone that is considered the other side will never get on a committee. I have interviewed for a committee, didn't get on the committee. Maybe I wasn't qualified, but my understanding, again, there was no prerequisites for these committees. So for me, it seems like maybe there's an issue there. And I agree with the committee's ideas and also what Mr. Pressemer said. This is going to turn into the same thing, the special committee. They went through all this work to create all of these things to go to voters, and you're going to turn them down because you're afraid of the answer. This committee, again, the Charter Review Committee, was created to take things to voters and to create things to take to the voters. Let the voters have a say. They might say no. That's fine. But I think, again, we're just hurting our citizens
by spending all of this time with committees to create these things to go to voters, to have the city council just turn them down because I don't really know why, because it doesn't benefit their agenda, is how I feel. So that's all. Thank you.
Patty Spreen?
Patty Sprain, 20488 Southwest Lavender Place, Sherwood, Oregon. Jennifer pretty much spoke, as did Tony, concerning the committees and the special committees and the number of committees that have been put together over the past year since last May, addressing different issues, very significant issues to many of the residents. And they were all volunteer committees. And myself and my mother and a handful of other folks did apply and never heard back. And then through word of mouth, received word of who was chosen and who hadn't been. But I suppose my recommendation is perhaps just a little bit of follow through to all of the potential residents that take the time to apply, because there is no prerequisites except for you have to be a resident and you have to care. And I just think that's where we're coming from. We have no agenda. This whole game of politics, for the most part, is just that, politics. And it's really unfortunate for the community to always sway in one direction. So with that being said, thank you, Tony and Jennifer, for already bringing light to the fact that the folks that apply to these committees would like a little bit of follow-up. Just get back to us and let us know perhaps why or who was chosen, just a little bit of professionalism, because I was expecting to be interviewed and I was looking forward to being interviewed and I wasn't. So thank you.
Thank you. No other comments. I'm going to close the public hearing.
I make a motion that we accept Resolution 2014-057 as amended.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we now have citizen comments.
Oh, and I'm not done yet.
Where the resolution was
Yeah,
turned down.
I'd like to make a motion. So I'd like to make a motion to adopt the amended Resolution 2014-057 with the Scrivener's errors that were handed to us. And my motion is to approve ballot titles and explanatory statements and submitting proposed charter amendments to the city voters for ballots, titles, and explanatory statements in the attached exhibits being A, C, D, F, and G, and removing B and E at this time.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
Nay.
Right, I received no more citizen comments. We'll go into city manager report.
Point of order, those comments were related to the
Right, so I didn't have any more citizen
Oh, I see.
comments.
There was no-
Yeah.
I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a couple of quick things. First off, the lights at the schools, which we've been talking about for a long time, we're getting very close to completion. So Craig, do you want to give us just a real quick update on the schedule and how things are going there?
Yeah, they should be, they were digging the holes today. They should start installing the lights tomorrow. Also, they got to put some electrical in, probably the next 2 to 3 weeks. Hopefully, before school starts, the majority of the work will be completed besides cleanup. So there shouldn't be any problem. Everything was delivered yesterday, I believe. So shouldn't be any problems getting them up before daylight savings anyways. And we're trying to get them up before school starts.
Thanks, Craig. And then also, I just wanted to talk a little bit, real briefly, about signs and the sign code. Certainly, the election season is upon us, and people are getting excited about supporting their favorite ballot measure or candidate. And one of those expressions is obviously, signs. And so we've seen signs going up, and after talking to most everybody, or a lot of people that are involved in it, it sounds like everybody wants to follow the sign code and sign code rules, but there's been a little bit of issue in making sure that they understand. A couple years ago, we made some significant changes to the sign code, and so we've done a few things. The sign code is in Chapter 16.102 of the Municipal Code. There's a lot of language there. We put together a brochure which kind of breaks that out into temporary and portable signs, and we have some of those. We have some more upstairs. There might be some in the back if people are interested in those. But talking amongst staff today, we think there would be significant benefit in actually having a open house or some type of event here in the next week or two, and then maybe repeating that again in early September after all the different positions have been done, to kind of just walk through exactly what sign code means, how things work, what the different regulations are, and what is allowed and what's not allowed. Because if people are really wanting to follow the rules, then we're happy to spend the time to make sure that everybody understands what the code says and what the interpretations are. So we're just putting that together. This season starting a little bit earlier than maybe we had anticipated, which is great. And so we'll be having some future announcements, but hopefully next week or at the very latest the week after. Our code enforcement, I know our police chief is dedicated to that. We also have community development, which helped define some of what the signs mean and what the sizes are and what everything. So we can just walk through with all the people that are involved, whether they're candidates or they're people out there supporting whatever initiative or whatever, to make sure that there's some consistency and some information that can be passed back and forth, so that we have the best compliance that we possibly can. Because certainly enforcement is something that we take seriously, and it's, I think, the intent of everyone to enforce the code as it is, and there will certainly be mistakes that get made and some other things, but if it's just a process of education, we want to go the extra mile to try to do that. So we'll get something worked together and try to make it probably an evening type event where people, the most people can come in and get additional information to understand exactly what the sign code says and what is allowed and what isn't, and where and what size and everything else. So just wanted to bring that up in case there are any questions. And in the meantime, we certainly have brochures and would be happy to answer questions for people as they bring them up. So that's the city manager report.
There's quite a few signs around town right now that are out of code. What's going on with the enforcement on that?
Well, I know signs in the right of way. We did a sweep today and certainly picked up the ones that we found. It's a big city. There's a lot of right of ways, and certainly not all of them get picked up, and we're certainly not out there every day, but we try to make it around at least at the beginning of every week after the weekend where signs are allowed in the right of way. And we'll deal with the issues as they come up, but unless we want to dedicate an extraordinary amount of staff time to it, there's only so much that can be done. And
what do you do with the large ones that are somewhat permanently affixed that are out of code?
Well, if they're in the right of way, certainly that's one thing. If they're on private property, there's a process outlined in the code to deal with that, and certainly we'll take a look at the code. Talk to the property owners. There's an education process there. It's not just simply go out and find them. Obviously, we try to work with people and get them into compliance. And then if they won't, then there's process of enforcement that moves forward from there. So, Counselor?
I just have one clarification. I had a number of residents or constituents ask me over the weekend about the sign code, and I met with Bill Collins about a month ago to sort of understand the sign code, what's allowed and what's not allowed. And the one thing that we had talked about was, it was my understanding that signs are not allowed in roundabouts because of the safety concern of people driving and turning at the same time. And so is that true or not? And I don't believe it's mentioned in the brochure that you offered to hand out, and we can cover it in the proposed meeting. That's fine.
Sure.
It's just I received 5 or 6.
I believe
calls.
this is covered in, I just have it in front of me because I have a feeling there would be questions tonight. But Chapter 16-102-040, 5B says, signs shall not create a traffic safety or maintenance problem. The city may remove and dispose of any such signs that constitute a problem. I think it's been determined that signs at the roundabout can constitute a safety issue, and so therefore have been determined not to be allowed. But
I think that is correct, but I also absolutely understand that that may not be perfectly clear. And so through this informational meeting, and we can certainly make sure that's updated in the brochure, that this has been determined to mean this, and so people can make, I don't think people are willfully, wanting to disobey the code. It helps us identify where we need to provide additional clarification. So.
Right, and that's a great example because I read the section of code and it wouldn't have jumped out to anybody that meant you could put a sign at a roundabout, but that's what it means. So that's why we want to go the extra mile to do that education, because it can be a traffic safety concern as people are trying to negotiate something that's a little bit different, and they got to be watching incoming and exiting traffic, and so there's definitely more weaving movements that go on in a traffic circle, and that's why they're there. So
The one traffic circle that's new on Langer Farms Parkway, I've more than once been caught in a situation where you think somebody's exiting, but they're not. And I don't know what's unique. Maybe it's because of the size of that roundabout, but the line of sight is a little bit challenging. I don't remember if that was one of the roundabouts, but I would think that it's not a subject of right-of-way, it's a subject of safety. So, but if you could cover that with the chief or
we'll be
planning.
happy to. Like I say, everybody, from what I can tell,
helpful.
everybody is doing everything they can to try to comply. It's just, the rules sometimes, reading a code doesn't necessarily jump out at you as exactly what that means. So if with a little bit of education we can make things work more smoothly, we're happy to spend the time to do that.
Right. And I'll, I guess, second the notion that I'm sure everybody on council has, which is that whatever enforcement we do consistently. Whether or not it's carpet cleaning or painting or political or measures, that whatever enforcement we do it consistently and equitably, and which I think would help remove staff from that precarious situation of having to make a judgment call.
I want to remind council that we're going past 9:30, if that's okay with everybody. And we do have a URA board meeting after this and a executive session. So just a reminder. Okay. No further comments. We'll go.
Are we in council comments now?
We're going now to council comments. We aren't on council comments yet. We're still with city manager.
I'm done. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
So.
All right, council comments. We'll start at that end.
All right. I just wanted to clarify a vote tonight that I made, and the last vote that was that we had a divide. It's true, and I'm just going to tell you. I just want to state publicly how I feel about the comments that were made and the disagreement we had tonight. In my opinion, there's 2 ways for things to get on the ballot, and one could be council could recommend things which, in my opinion, should be things the council feels are good for the city and go to the ballot. They have to go to the ballot because it's a charter amendment. And the other way is for citizen initiative. And that's just, that really doesn't involve us in terms of, it doesn't involve our opinion. And both of those ways are adequate to get on the ballot. Once something gets on the ballot, all kinds of things are going to be said in the paper, the voter's guide, the hand-painted signs, and there's all kinds of stuff that's just not true and all that stuff. And the voters expect, in my opinion, for us to be putting forward things that we think are good. We are recommending this, in my opinion, when we put something on the ballot, that's us recommending something to the citizens. And I know for a fact a lot of citizens see it that way. They see all this crap and it's true or it's false, it's conflicting, and they say, well, what's true? Well, one thing they can grip onto is the people they put up here are recommending this to the citizens. That's how I see it. And when we put something out to the citizens, we're saying, citizens, we think this is good. And we think this is something you should approve. That's how I see it. It would be contradictory for us, in my opinion, to put something forward that we thought was bad for the city. That's what initiative is for. It's there. And And if there's a rogue council that's just not doing what the citizens want, the initiative and recall are both there. And future elections, they're all there. But I do know that people depend on us to wade through all the garbage and say, we're making a recommendation of what we think is good for this town. And that's why I voted the way I did. I feel that we have the ordinances or the charter amendments that I believe I can recommend and I can stand behind. If for anybody that wants to come and ask me, I can say, you know what, I think this is good for the city. That's why this is a council putting something to the citizens. Didn't have to go to the initiative method because that's something that we recommended. So that's how I see it. It's the system we have, and we could always change that system, but that's how I see it. I don't see it rational for us to put stuff before the citizens that we think are bad for the city, because that would completely confuse the citizens. For us to be putting stuff on the ballot, essentially recommending it, when a majority of this council doesn't think it's good. So I see it. So anybody, you're welcome to meet me, call me, or talk to me after council. I'll stand behind my decision. But that's why I voted the way I did.
I agree with everything Councilor Grant said right there. Chamber of Commerce updates. The next chamber breakfast is this coming Tuesday, August 12th at 7:15 a.m. at Sherwood High School Commons. The chamber golf tournament is Thursday, September 18th at Meriwether Golf Club. Starbucks just opened today at noon with the drive-through up at Parkway Village. And Walmart's grand opening is next Wednesday, August 13th at 7:30 a.m. YMCA, they had a highly successful dual event that raised quite a bit of money for their annual campaign. The blueberry picking at Our Table Co-op raised over $600 for the teens. The annual triathlon and barbecue in collaboration with the charter school is Saturday, August 16th at 10 a.m. and the barbecue goes from 11 to 1. The annual pool maintenance at the YMCA is scheduled for August 30th through September 14th, so mark that on your calendars. There won't be a whole lot of water in the pool. And the Y is also developing a new program that will be released soon, so keep your ear to the ground for that. And just following up on the police advisory board, I listened in at a distance at the last meeting, and I had expected we were going to talk about it this week, and I'm just not sure where we're at, and so I just wanted to hear an update at some point about where that's at. That's all I've got.
Councilor Clark.
So I wanted to thank everyone who came out this weekend for Relay to Life. It was awesome, and we have learned over the years. And in the stand where we have they have all of the things that you can bid on, the auction items, instead of putting the wine that could perhaps explode in 100-degree weather, there were lovely pictures of wine in the baskets that people could bid on and get. So kudos to the group learning from the past. Mayor Middleton and I kicked off the event, and it was wonderful. Again, I would like to just give an extra shout out to the top participants. I'm sorry, my voice is a little funny today. Carol Apple raised $2,216, and Cindy Francois raised $2,194.55. So great job to these top participants. The top teams were A Walking Miracle, raising $6,714.91, and Run for Remission raised $5,473.05. I want to thank the City of Sherwood team leaders, Cheryl Childers and Julie Blooms. They both did a fantastic job. They even had little lit lanterns for the evening. It was a great event, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them. They did a great job bringing a team for the city that I was proud to be part of. Yes.
Did they give a final amount raised?
I didn't hear the final. Did you hear the final? I didn't hear it announced. So in the next meeting, I'll give the announcement because they might have still been doing the tallies. Sometimes I hadn't seen it come out. We had a great Robin Hood Festival. Congratulations to Pat Allen for running the beer garden. Great job. That's a tough job in the heat, and he did an awesome job. So I just wanted to, and the Robin Hood Festival Association, I just wanted to thank them. They did a fantastic job. The events were great. It was beautifully executed. So I wanted to thank all of them and all of the volunteers that put that together. It was another wonderful tank. And I'm not going to lie, I think that my son was in the dunk tank for about 7 hours. As they take volunteers for the dunk tank, and he was more than happy to do it. I did not. I was running my booth, but wow. I mean, he came back and I'm going to go back. Okay, it's been 5 hours, but you go. I mean, and it was warm enough that it was great. So a wonderful community event. I wanted to give an extra shout out. Councilor Langer already did for the YMCA Family Triathlon. My family has participated in this from its inception, and it is, if you've never gone, you've got to. It is such a fun event, and that's from the littles all the way up. I remember when Del and I used to go with Declan and Elena when they were smaller, and he would put Elena in front of him, and I would put Declan in front of me to do the short swim. And you can do it with littles. I've seen strollers. I've seen two-seated bikes. It is a great way to expose your kids to an athletic event that it's not super competitive. It can be competitive, but it's not something that people are knocking each other over. It's a lot of fun. And so there's two choices. The All-Star is the higher one, and that's a 100-yard swim and 5-mile bike and 2-mile run. Or you can do it with the rookie, with the younger ones, with the 50-yard swim, the 2-mile bike, and the half-mile run. And it's followed by an awesome barbecue by the YMCA. So I'd recommend anybody to go to that. August 21st is the next Main Street meeting. It's at 4 p.m. SERPAC's going to be meeting again. We have been kind of in a hiatus, and so we're going to have 3 meetings So we're going to get going on that. And August 16th coming up. If you have not bought your football car wash tickets, you need to. Those little footballers are going to be running around, and if you didn't get one coming to your house, then go ahead and show up. It's a great event. The boys don't wash the cars. We do. And the parents have a great time. It's always warm, and boy, have I seen some very dirty, very big trucks come in, and we have fun anyway. It's a great time for a great cause. So go Knights. It's at the Archer Glen. But they had 2 locations at one point, but Archer Glen is where I've worked. So Archer Glen and August 16th.
They do motorcycles too, because they did mine last year. Council President Henderson.
Just have a few announcements. One thing I just want to let people know in the audience and on the tape is that we often talk about our water bill. And effective July 1st, there is a 8% increase in the Clean Water Services. That's our storm, sewer, and water runoff bill, which is half of our water bill. So we collect that on behalf of Clean Water Services, and we have absolutely no control over those rate increases. They're a entity who serves our community for those services. And so if you will see an increase in your July 1 bill. That is a function of Clean Water Services and not the city. The city has not raised water rates in the recent past, and it's my understanding we won't be raising them anytime soon unless we have some unforeseen maintenance or capital issues. So if you're unhappy with that, Clean Water Services would be your contact. I want to thank the community for supporting Les Mis. We had a 3-night run down in Stella Olson Park. It was extremely successful, very well received, and I'm very grateful to everybody who came out and supported the show, including volunteers who came and helped us, because it is a challenge to get people in and out of one gate, one bridge every night for 3 nights. And I want to thank Public Works for helping us work through some of the challenges of, well, some of the many challenges that we have with that venue. And this year, I think we had more staff input and meetings than we have in the past. And I think that that's a partnership that continues to improve as we understand what we can and cannot do and the limitations, and appreciate staff's input on that. Kristen Schweitzer, is she still here? Okay. So in June, in June, Councilor Folsom and Kristen Schweitzer, who's our Community Services Director, went back to DC and met with not only our elected delegations, but many different agencies, EPA, USDA, National Endowment for the Arts. And one of the things that happened as a result of that trip is Kristen Schweitzer was requested or asked to serve on a USDA, which is, believe it or not, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And she has been serving on a panel. And one of our motivations for getting involved in that was that potentially could lead to grants for our Saturday market. We have a very unique, very thriving Saturday market program, including Saturday market. There's also a farms to table program that potentially we could have access to. And one of the reasons why we're able to do that, and Kristen's been doing that pretty much on her own time and on weekends, something the community probably doesn't know about, is that potentially we could have access to USDA funds that could make our Saturday market financially stable and not necessarily always be worrying about, the money, they either come in or don't come in. And so I hope we'll hear more about that, in the near future. And lastly, I would like to ask the council to, or I'd like to ask that we put the Police Advisory Board, I don't know if that's an ordinance or a resolution, back on the agenda for August 19th. It was removed last week. And I guess that was actually helpful because the chief had National Night Out tonight and he couldn't be here. But I'd like to see that put back on the August 19th agenda. I had 2 citizens who contacted me who thought it was going to be on the agenda and it was removed. And so I'd like to see that put back on the agenda for August 19th, as well as in the near future, I was wondering if we could invite the Police Foundation, which is a newly formed 501 foundation, to come and make a presentation, as it's my understanding that they're interested in funding some of the youth substance abuse task force programs for drug education, as well as drug prevention, and would like to hear from them about what their plans are and any ways that we can partner in the near future.
Is that a motion, Linda?
I don't know. Does it need to be a motion?
Do we need to, what's it take to get that
No.
put on the agenda?
So,
A council member may request through the city manager that an item be placed on an agenda. The city manager will place the item on the agenda forecast for the mayor and council president to review. So
Okay.
it goes on the agenda forecast.
Yeah, so I'll put it on the agenda forecast.
thank you.
and we'll go from
And
there.
that's all I have.
I have nothing other than to thank Pat Allen for the hard work you did. I know you did a lot of work on that, and it took a lot of time, so thank you. Other than that, we're going to adjourn, and we're going to a URA board executive session.